Chapter 1261. Li Qingshan clutched his chest. He felt a tightness in his heart, and his ears were buzzing. Qingshan, don't get distracted. Ha ha ha, we are doomed. Our voyage ends here. Gu Yenying's urging and Luo Ho Xiaoming's wild laughter pulled Li Qingshan's consciousness back. He found himself in a dangerous situation. Perhaps it was an illusion caused by the moment of being swallowed by the space-devouring beast, but he would never have such a strong reaction because of danger. Little Anne, the inside of the space-devouring beast, was as quiet as the void. Countless fragments of the world floated quietly, including the mountain that just now had been swallowed. Li Qingshan felt as if he had entered a different world. He no longer had to drift in the void, and this gave him an indescribable sense of security. However, the danger of death didn't disappear. Instead, it became stronger. These two feelings intertwined and formed an extremely strange mental state. He held his breath and clenched the living soil of the nine heaven as if something terrible was about to happen. Kunpeng folded its wings as well, shielding Li Qingshan and Luo Ho Xiaoming, watching everything around. Only Luo Ho Xiaoming couldn't stop laughing. He laughed at fate, laughed at himself, until Li Qingshan slapped him on the back of his head. He turned around and glared at Li Qingshan, looking into a pair of dark eyes. There was fear and despair in those eyes, but it wasn't enough to shake his strong will. Gu Yenying laughed and said, "Little Ming, you've been beaten again, haven't you? While you're laughing, please think of a way to help us get out of this." "These two," Luo Ho Xiaoming said. "I'm sorry, I can't do it either." He had already said the last word, but it seemed to have shrunk countless times. It wasn't that his voice had been lowered, but his sense of existence had been greatly reduced. Li Qingshan watched a mountain suddenly disappear. When he looked closer, he found that the mountain didn't disappear. Instead, it shrank to the size of a fist and flew away, guided by an invisible force. Kunpeng suddenly shrank by 10 times. Gu Yenying said, "I didn't do it. The space-devouring beast is digesting us." The space-devouring beast dared to swallow them, so it naturally had the ability to digest them. This compression, like the wriggling of the stomach, it could destroy everything. If it were not for Kunpeng's protection, Rahu and Xiaoming would be dead for sure. Even Li Qingshan might have died on the spot. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, "Do you understand now? Soon we will be crushed into meat paste." "No, meat paste," Li Qingshan said. "I don't like either of them." "I don't." Kunpeng spread its wings and flew. The Kunpeng spread its wings and flew in the opposite direction of the mountain. Li Qingshan leaned against the Kunpeng's back. Luo Ho Xiaoming glanced at him. Suddenly, he thought of another man, the man he thought he had forgotten. "Father, am I still weak?" It felt like a million years. Or maybe it was just a pause between one heartbeat. Li Qingshan had a flash of inspiration. "It's coming." Earth force field was fully activated. In that instant, it was soundless, but it felt like the world was collapsing. Kunpeng's body shrank again. Its wingspan was less than 100 miles. Li Qingshan seemed to have been punched. His face turned red, but his expression became more stubborn. He turned and spat out a mouthful of blood. The nine heaven living soil was his divine tool. Not only did it provide him with endless power, it could also greatly increase the power of the ox demon god art. But it was not his own power. Just now, he had almost used up all his demon chi. He could only replenish it from the small world. The forceful compression of the earth force field produced a violent backlash. It was supported by the phoenix's life force. Luo Ho Xiaoming, on the other hand, was unharmed. "Yenying, shrink your body. Come into the earth force field." Gu Yenying was worried. "But can you hold on? You have to let Kuan Peng conserve its power, said Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan said, even if he could not escape death, he had to be the toughest bone to digest. Luo Ho Xiaoming suddenly thought of something. He suddenly said, stop, turn around. What? The body of the swallowing void beasts is not that easy to break. Even if we manage to escape, we will still be hunted down. We have to go deeper into the swallowing void beasts and fight for our lives. Makes sense. That's more like it. Li Qingshan smiled and patted Luo Ho Xiaoming's shoulder. The mental communication was completed in an instant. Kuan Peng shrank its body without hesitation, turned around, and flew at full speed. She used all her strength, but the speed of flying was still not as fast as in the void. She said, Qingshan, hold on. In a moment, Li Qingshan suffered 2 more heavy pressures. His tall and sturdy body shrank. His internal organs were all ruptured. His brain was a mess, and his indestructible tiger bones were full of cracks. He half knelt on Kuan Peng's back with his head lowered. His body was covered in blood, but he did not move. He silently counted the coming of the next heavy pressure. This would probably be the last time. However, the heavy pressure did not come. Kuan Peng passed through an invisible barrier. Li Qingshan raised his head and asked, did we succeed? He could vaguely see many twinkling stars in front of him. Could it be that he had returned to the void? Luo Ho Xiaoming answered, yes, almost succeeded. We have already left the stomach of the swallowing void beast. This is probably its womb. Those are just embryonic swallowing void beasts. Li Qingshan's broken eyes recovered, and his eyesight became clear again. He saw tens of thousands of baby swallowing void beasts huddled together. Their eyes were glowing if they were eyes. You call these baby swallowing void beasts. These bloody things were all strange. None of them looked like their mother, and none of them could be counted as baby. Gu Yenying gave a bitter smile and said, they are so small. I don't think they are aggressive yet. While she was talking, all baby swallowing void beasts moved, approaching them. I guess these little things are not here to greet us. Li Qingshan curved his mouth corners. This scene was like a nightmare of countless swallowing void beasts, which seemed a bit ridiculous. The group of swallowing void beasts approached quickly. If they retreated, they would be digested. If they advanced, they would be eaten. Gu Yenying said, Oi, you 2 men, think of something. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, thank you, but I'm just a child. Li Qingshan gazed at the incoming group of swallowing void beasts. Little Ming, I think you said that the swallowing void beasts turned into worlds. Yeah, I just happen to have a world. In other words, I have a swallowing void beast. Luo Ho Xiaoming's eyes lit up. That's right. All of you, close your eyes. Gu Yenying and Luo Ho Xiaoming both closed their eyes. Kuan Peng closed his eyes as well. Li Qingshan brought his palms together and unleashed the spirit turtle's ability, Water Mirror's image. Little An's figure appeared in his mind. She seemed to be in both pain and sorrow. Afterwards, she closed her eyes as well. God bless us. Chapter 12:62. In the small world, time flowed by, and the sun and moon passed by. Regardless of whether there was a God or not, the world was the same from start to finish. It operated according to its own set rules, which was called destiny. From a certain perspective, the world was like a lazy master. It was indifferent to the various matters of the house, and the slightest carelessness would cause the world to change. Only when a thief entered the house would it react slightly. It was almost instinctive, similar to how the space-devouring beasts digested their food. The existence of a god was equivalent to an autocratic butler who could act on behalf of the master. Li Qingshan had been a thief, and after many hardships, he had finally become a butler. When he satisfied the most primitive desire of this lazy master with a large number of world fragments, mountains, and land, he had obtained the master's approval. In other words, he had obtained the destiny. Normally, as a butler, Li Qingshan could do whatever he wanted as long as he had enough power. He would not care about what the lazy master thought. It would be best if the master did not have any thoughts at all, so that he could control the destiny of the world. However, at this moment, he had no choice but to awaken the world will. However, he did not have much confidence in his success. Whether the world could traverse such a long distance through the moon's mirror and deceive the group of void-devouring beasts like other things was still unknown. Success or failure depended on this. Li Qingshan slowly opened his eyes. The space-devouring beasts were swimming around them, as if wondering why their food had suddenly disappeared. Success! Gu Yenying and Luo Ho Xiaoming could not believe it. Li Qingshan did not reply. He could feel the vast and empty world with him. If that was all, it would be fine. What was even more amazing was that a deep blue bubble that looked like a spore was rapidly expanding. It enveloped them and gave them a deep and peaceful feeling. It was as if they had returned to the small world. However, the texture of this blue bubble was very similar to the surrounding space-devouring beasts. In other words, it was a space-devouring beast. As it grew larger, it grew a long tail. It swayed gently. It looked like a tadpole. The space-devouring beasts completely lost interest and gradually dispersed. What's going on? Luo Ho Xiaoming was also shocked. Even with his knowledge and experience as a god, he had never heard of such a thing. This Li Qingshan couldn't answer either. His original plan was to use the world to bluff his way through. This was to prevent the void-devouring beasts from treating them as food. Who would have thought that a true void-devouring beast would be born? Gu Yenying guessed, could this be the original form of the small world? But why would it appear here? Was it because this was the womb of the void-devouring beast? Could this be a clone of the small world? Qingshan, how is the small world? Are there any changes? Li Qingshan shrugged. Everything is normal. Maybe it's to buy a house and give a pet as a gift. All right, we've escaped another calamity. Luo Ho Xiaoming heaved a sigh of relief. This probably involved the most fundamental laws of the 3,000 worlds and the boundless void, and there were too many coincidences. Perhaps only the gods of the 9 heavens could give an answer, or even the gods of the 9 heavens would sigh. After all, there were very few world gods. After becoming a god, they would be forever trapped in a world, unable to travel in the void. Not many cultivators would travel to the void either. If they had the ability, they would not be devoured by the void-devouring beasts, nor would they enter the womb of the void-devouring beasts. The probability of each of these events happening was extremely low, and it was practically impossible for all of them to happen together. As they spoke, the void-devouring beast stopped growing, and its length reached 30,000 zhang. Gu Yenying said, Qingshan, can you control this little void-devouring beast? Once it grows up, it won't swallow us first, will it? It can't be considered absolute control, but I can indeed control it. Li Qingshan sensed for a moment. As a world god, he could act in place of the world will. That's good. All right, this is what it means to be blessed after surviving a great disaster. Yenying, put away your Kuan-Peng feathers. Let's try out our new ride. Li Qingshan waved his hand. Let's go, Deep Blue Fatty. Luo Ho Xiaoming said, wait, Deep Blue Fatty is. The void-devouring beast swayed its tail and swam forward. The corner of Luo Ho Xiaoming's eye twitched. Why? Li Qingshan said matter-of-factly. There has to be a name, so you know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, we'll be facing a group of little void-devouring beasts in the stomach of a big void-devouring beast. Luo Ho Xiaoming pursed his lips and nodded. All right, I know the answer, but why do you have to call it such a stupid name? Because it's dark blue, likes to eat, and is very fat. Don't you think this name? Luo Ho Xiaoming raised his hand. All right, pretend I didn't ask. Thus, the three of them rode little Fatty through the huge womb of the void-devouring beast. Li Qingshan opened his eyes wide and looked around, observing the shape of every void-devouring beast. It was as if he was touring the underwater world in his previous life. Gu Yenying said, Qingshan, can your new pet teleport us out? Li Qingshan replied without turning his head, Why do we have to go out? Aren't we going to kill this void-devouring beast? There's no other way. Killing such a huge void-devouring beast is probably not an easy task. Who knows if there are any dangers ahead? Why don't we think of a way to return to the void? The void-devouring beasts shouldn't attack their own kind. Yes, the void-devouring beasts shouldn't attack their own kind, Li Qingshan mumbled to himself. He then asked, What do you think, little Ming? Of course. Otherwise, with the power of the void-devouring beasts, who knows how many worlds would be devoured? Then I'm relieved. Li Qingshan smiled brightly. Deep blue little Fatty suddenly pounced toward a nearby void-devouring beast covered in tentacles. It opened its mouth wide and bit down on one of the tentacles. What are you doing? Gu Yenying and Luo Ho Xiaoming were both shocked. That void-devouring beast was more than 10 times bigger than deep blue little Fatty. This was practically a suicide attack. Li Qingshan laughed. I'm not a gentleman if I don't take revenge. Watch me kill its entire family first. Gu Yenying and Luo Ho Xiaoming both tensed up. Although the void-devouring beasts wouldn't attack their own kind, no one knew what would happen if they were attacked by their own kind. If they angered the void-devouring beasts, the consequences would be unimaginable. As expected, the void-devouring beast didn't retaliate. It just wandered away. Meanwhile, deep blue little Fatty devoured the broken tentacles and grew stronger bit by bit. Although it was being controlled by Li Qingshan to attack its own kind, it didn't show any signs of objecting. It continued to eat with relish. Li Qingshan could feel the favor of heaven's will more and more. When it's worth fighting, we should fight. Otherwise, there will come a day when we won't be able to fight even if we want to. Chapter 1263. The three of them were not lacking in courage. They dared to fight at the critical moment. If they had a powerful space-swallowing beast to protect them, their journey would be much smoother. And it turned out that Li Qingshan had won. The terrifying group of space-swallowing beasts had become harmless now. They could only dodge deep blue Fatty's attacks. Moreover, they did not learn their lesson. They would stop after running for a while. Deep blue Fatty was like a wolf in a flock of sheep. It bit here and there, slowly growing from a small wolf to a vicious wolf. The other space-swallowing beasts could not resist. Devour, devour, devour. One space-swallowing beast after another disappeared into its mouth. However, it did not grow as fast as expected. Sometimes, after a period of digestion, it would become smaller. Li Qingshan discovered the reason. The miniature world on the horizon rapidly grew larger as well. Perhaps it could no longer be referred to as a miniature world anymore. It was a miniature world at the very least. That was where Deep Blue, little Fatty's original body, resided. He was becoming more and more worthy of his title as the god of the world. It could be said that he could destroy mountains with a single thought. After a life and death ordeal, he finally had the time to focus on the small world. Many ships set out to sea in search of the power of the Hero King. Countless people perished in the sea, but there were also many lucky ones who obtained unprecedented power and ran amok on the sea. Literature, plus this attracted more people to the sea. For a time, dragons and snakes rose, and heroes came forth. Every day, There were battles and killings, and every day there were new legends. The martial arts that had passed away seemed to have returned, becoming even more turbulent. Everyone in the world believed that this was the will of the Hero King. After all, such a world was more interesting. The strict rule of the past was all the work of the world society's leader, Gu Yenying. It did not suit the old man's true preferences. However, the world society naturally would not give up on the rule of the world. The Hero King's sons became the pioneers of this adventure. Li Guanyin brought Big Turtle Ninja to establish his base on the sea. He directed the Xuanshu Hall to the spiritual islands, trying to restore order to the chaotic sea. With the advantage of his innate bloodline, he traveled through the raging waves. He was called the Sea King. When the world became bigger and bigger, as the spirit chi became denser, the birds in the sky and the fish in the deep sea all had more possibilities. The White Ape King and the Phantom Dancer were no longer coincidental. The demon race was on the rise. In front of me, the governor of the Eastern Sea. The World Assembly was nothing. The Hero King is nothing. A big ship was floating on the sea. The deck was bustling with noise, as if a wild celebration was taking place. The captain's drunken ramblings caused the deck to fall silent. The name of the chivalrous king was deeply rooted in people's hearts. However, no one dared to oppose the cruel governor of the East Sea. Bah, what a big idiot! There was a man tied to the mast. His tanned skin was riddled with scars, but he didn't seem to care at all. The Eastern Sea governor flew into a rage. Chop off his hands and feet, and immediately sink him into the sea. No, I'll do it myself. With a sinister smile, he walked over and brandished the treasured saber he had just obtained. Puff! The Navy admiral was crushed to death on the deck like a bug. Flesh and blood covered the floor, and the treasured sword was stuck in the middle. Ah! The deck was in a state of panic. The desperados who usually licked blood on the edge of their blades were now screaming like girls. The man froze for a moment, then laughed loudly. This caused the pirates to gradually come to their senses. They surrounded the Navy admiral with malicious intentions, ready to carry out the Navy admiral's last wish. The man said, "You can kill me, or you can let me be the captain. Otherwise, with your meager cultivation, you won't be able to protect anything in the cabin." The pirates looked at each other. They had never seen such a shameless person. However, this man's swordsmanship was superb, and he had almost cultivated the white ape sword technique to the extreme. In terms of strength, he was above the dead governor of the East Sea. Once he was let go, no one would be able to control him. Don't listen to his nonsense. Let's kill him first. Then we'll find a remote dock to divide our things and disperse. The man's expression did not change. Don't forget how that idiotic governor died. Xiang Tian glanced at him. The knight-errant king has already remembered this ship. If not for me, his son, all of you would have sunk into the sea. You're the son of the knight-errant king? The pirates were shocked. They were all big shots. Illegitimate child. Sorry, old man Wu, although you're not my biological father. I treat you like one in my heart. The pirates hesitated. There were many people in the world who claimed to be the illegitimate child of the knight-errant king, but just now they did not dare to doubt him. Don't worry. Not only do I not hold a grudge, I'm also loyal and trustworthy. I'm much better than that idiotic governor. After some argument, no one dared to make a move. They untied the man and unsealed his acupoints. He stretched his body and shouted, "Remember, my name is Wu Tai's Han. Wu as in Wu Huan, Tai as in Tai Dan, and Shan as in Qing Shan. Who hit me just now? Crawl over here." A pirate said, "Hey, your surname is not Li?" Wu Tai's Han grabbed him and spat on his face. "I took my stepfather's surname. Can I?" after beating up the pirates. He glanced at the pool of blood and flesh and broke out in a cold sweat. He thought to himself, "Knight-errant king, please protect me." He went to the cabin and stared at the statue of a woman. He had an inexplicable feeling that the woman would come back to life at any moment. A voice suddenly sounded in his mind. "Where is this?" "Qingshan, now is not the time to watch a show." Gu Yanying's voice pulled Li Qingshan back to reality. Li Qingshan smiled and shook his head. In an instant, he had seen through Wu Tieshan's life. He did not expect to meet him once. The child from back then had already grown up. It was a great blessing to be able to obtain this statue. At this moment, Deep Blue Fatty was almost done eating. His body had already surpassed the smaller void-swallowing beasts. Now, he pounced on one and devoured the remaining void-swallowing beasts in no time. After Li Qingshan told him about the changes in the small world, he felt like his body was filled with spiritual qi. "You're really lucky," Luo Xiaoming sighed. This was a world that could devour other worlds. If it continued to devour like this, would it devour the entire starry sky? When that happened, how big would the small world be? Of course, but is it appropriate for a natural-born god to praise others for being blessed? Li Qingshan smiled. He would not be arrogant enough to think that all of this was due to his own hard work, nor would he forget the fated encounter and the majestic back view. He only needed a hair to complete the inheritance. There was no need for an ignorant youth to ride on his back. It wasn't to repay any kindness, but to prove that you weren't wrong about him. Chapter 1264. Under Li Qingshan's hot-blooded and inexplicable command, Deep Blue Fatty rushed out of the womb and returned to the huge stomach of the big swallowing beast. Of course, this was a far-fetched description. The big swallowing beast was fundamentally different from ordinary creatures. Rather than saying that the stomach occupied most of its body, it was more accurate to say that everything in its body was in the stomach, which Luo Xiaoming described as empty. Deep Blue Fatty's body suddenly shrank, but after the invisible pressure disappeared, it immediately returned to its original size and shape. Under Li Qingshan's will, it waved its long tail and swam into the depths of the stomach. It passed through a few more strange areas, but none of them posed a threat. Suddenly, a star appeared in the darkness, flickering with colorful light. "What is that?" Li Qingshan was surprised. In this deep darkness, everything could be seen clearly, but that star seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. It clearly only had 3 colors, red, yellow, and blue, but he felt that he had never seen anything so resplendent. Every color was changing: crimson, dark red, blood red, orange, bright yellow, light yellow, azure, light blue, deep blue. There were so many that it could not be described with words. The 3 colors intertwined with each other, and it was ever-changing, containing all the colors in the world. As they drew closer and closer to the star, Li Qingshan also understood why the star was twinkling. Other than these 3 colors, there was also a colorless aura surging around the star. Every time the aura blew, the star would twinkle, and its shape and color would change subtly. So beautiful. Gu Yenying was also mesmerized by it, like a normal girl looking at a piece of jewelry. And it was a piece of jewelry from all over the world. Luo Xiaoming said, "It's the world." Li Qingshan understood. Earth, fire, wind, and water. So this is the original appearance of the world. It must be the heart of this big swallowing beast. As they got closer, the star became bigger, and its brilliance became more dazzling. The heavy ground, the blazing fire, the raging wind, and the deep water all intertwined to form a magnificent scene. Even though they already knew that the big swallowing beast could nurture a world, they were still shocked when they saw it with their own eyes. The majestic power contained within it was enough to move anyone. perhaps after millions of years, all of this would transform into a new world. Another new star would appear in the void. Then, countless living beings began to multiply. It transformed into endless love and hatred, sorrow and joy, separation and reunion. Luo Ho Xiaoming's knowledge was far above that of Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying, but looking at this scene, he could not help but think of the worlds that he had destroyed with his own hands, and for a moment he was also speechless. And he noticed Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying both entered the state of enlightenment. He didn't want to disturb her, seeing the origin of the world with his own eyes. Such an opportunity was extremely rare even for him, and it was even more so for them. The word Tao comprehension contained endless profundities. The reason was simple. Just like how mortals would feel the abstract concept of life when they saw a newborn baby, they would feel deeply moved and perhaps change their words and actions. If mortals wanted to achieve something, they would need a lot of experience, let alone cultivators. The essence of cultivation was to seek truth and change. First, there must be a change in thinking. Then there would be a change in cultivation. But for cultivators, such opportunities were increasingly rare. After seeing too much of life and death, there would not be any great enlightenment, and it would often take a long time to accumulate. If the accumulation was insufficient, there would be a bottleneck, and one's cultivation would not be able to advance. Sometimes, what one thought could surpass thousands of years of cultivation. That was why cultivators with high enlightenment had such a great advantage. Seeing a falling leaf and knowing the world was in autumn was already beyond the reach of ordinary people. And those monstrous geniuses who could understand the rules of the movement of all things and stars when they saw an apple fall to the ground were things that ordinary people could not even dream of. Although it was not impossible to make up for, it would take 100 times the effort and hard work. For this one thought, the three of them had experienced a great risk. Only at this moment did they truly obtain a reward that belonged to them. No matter how big the world was, no matter how strong little Fatty was, they were all external forces that could be borrowed but not relied on. Only enlightenment and cultivation belonged to oneself. After who knew how long, Gu Yenying returned to her senses. Her body and mind seemed to have gone through a baptism. She felt like she had become more and more integrated with the Kuan Peng feather. Even without the Kuan Peng feather, undergoing the fourth heavenly tribulation would no longer be difficult. It was not just because of what she saw, but because the cultivators of the 9 provinces had never even heard of this journey since they left the 9 provinces. She could not help but become more and more certain of her own path. She wanted to fly higher and further, see more and obtain true freedom. Looking back at Li Qingshan, she saw that he remained motionless. 2 stars condensed from earth, fire, wind, and water were reflected in his eyes. She knew that his comprehension and gains were greater than hers, so she watched over him quietly. However, what Li Qingshan saw was not just the existence of earth, fire, wind, and water. There was also the existence of emptiness. Without emptiness, the earth, fire, wind, and water could not be condensed. Without the earth, fire, wind, and water, emptiness would be meaningless. The earth, fire, wind, and water just happened to correspond to the 4 transformations he balanced: the ox-demon transformation, the phoenix transformation, the tiger-demon transformation, and the spirit-turtle transformation. This was no coincidence. Instead, it was the foundation laid down by the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine. How grand was it to construct a world within one's body? Presumably, only by imitating the way the world was born and operated could he balance these extremely pure powers. In the battle against the Demon King in the Azura field back then, he had relied on controlling the earth, fire, wind, and water to turn defeat into victory. However, ever since then, the demon suppression statuary was deeply suppressed. When he comprehended the ape-demon transformation, the balance was broken again. At this moment, he saw a brand new balance. Now that he thought about it, the main reason why he could balance the earth, fire, wind, and water was because he was in the Azura field. The Azura field was his emptiness. Once he left the Azura field, his powers would be drawn in by everything. The extremely subtle balance would no longer exist. All that remained was a general balance. At this moment, he saw an opportunity. The ape-demon transformation just happened to represent emptiness. I understand now. When I cultivated the first 4 transformations, the balance was established. From then on, what I needed to balance was no longer the divine and demonic natures. Instead, I needed to construct a world within my body. The ape-demon transformation is not a disruptor that disrupts the balance between the divine and the demonic. Instead, it is an indispensable power that allows this world to truly be established. With that in mind, Li Qingshan broke through to the second layer of the ape-demon transformation. Originally, he was worried that any slight improvement in his cultivation would attract the 4th heavenly tribulation, but he was no longer afraid now. Waves of power seeped out of his body. His aura weakened instead, but his power became even more condensed. The value of a sword forged from scrap metal was nowhere near the 3-foot-long blade. It could perhaps be used to smash people in battle, but if he wanted to improve it further, he would have to refine it again and again. He powered the spirit turtle transformation with all his might, deriving the embryonic form of the world before him. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, deriving it out of thin air, this was an almost impossible task. Now that he could see it, and he had also comprehended the operating laws of the minor world, things could not be simpler. After he finished deriving it, a model formed in his mind. He began to imitate it. First, he compressed and reorganized all the power in his body. Then, he constructed it in a better manner. If he transformed into his demonic form right now, his figure would definitely constantly shrink. No, it still won't work. The ape-demon transformation is too weak. Emptiness can't accommodate earth, fire, wind, water, unless I also raise the ape-demon transformation to the 5th layer. However, the 1st and 2nd layers are still fine, but towards the end, the power will start to increase explosively, and the 4th heavenly tribulation will definitely descend. Li Qingshan frowned and pondered. Soon he had an idea. Please protect me. Okay. Gu Yenying and Luo Ho Xiaoming both had a serious look on their faces. Their paths were the same, and their lives were entrusted to each other. Protecting him was just a small matter. Li Qingshan closed his eyes, and his body ignited in flames. One could vaguely see a phoenix dancing in the flames. Phoenix Nirvana, rebirth from the ashes. This was the first time Li Qingshan had actively used Phoenix Nirvana. In the past, he had been beaten to death by others, and he had no choice but to undergo Nirvana rebirth. This time, it felt very different. He was in the best state he had ever been, whether it was his body or his spirit. Moreover, there was a world providing him with spiritual power. After Nirvana, he was reborn. Before his strength began to recover, he established a new balance with all his might. When the ox demon did not move, the tiger demon leaped. The spirit turtle dove and the phoenix danced. The ape demon spread its chest, and its arms constantly extended, embracing everything. With a boom, the demon core exploded, and a world was born in his body. Li Qingshan was overjoyed. This world was so tiny. Although it was only in its most primitive form, it had all 5 organs. The 5 organs were earth, fire, wind, water, and space. However, his aura had become much weaker. That was because he had suppressed the ox, tiger, turtle, and phoenix to the second layer. The initial transformations of the 9 transformations of the demons and gods were very weak. With these 2 basic cultivation levels, it would not be strange for his strength to fall back to the demon general realm. At most, he would be a demon commander. However, he was clearly still a demon king right now. If Deep Blue Little Fatty risking his life to devour the void-devouring beasts was a gamble, then he was a steam engine turning into a reactor. He had undergone a qualitative change. Next, he could continue cultivating the ape demon transformation. This was not difficult for him. Once he reached the 5th layer, the power of the other transformations would be completely restored. By then, he would possess unprecedented power. It was almost equivalent to going through 4 heavenly tribulations. The most amazing thing was that, according to his calculations, he would still not attract 4 heavenly tribulations by then. He would still be a demon king, and he would be able to return to the 9 provinces and reunite with Little. And how is this possible? What kind of cultivation method is this? Luo Ho and Little Ming were shocked. This wasn't an aura that a fiend king could possess at all. Ordinary cultivators often had to rely on crossing tribulation in order to produce this kind of transformation. How could they jump up from where they were and immediately fly away? The 9 transformations of the demons and gods. Li Qingshan revealed the truth out of trust and confidence. He also wanted to understand the relevant information from Luo Ho Xiaoming. Brother Niu was not a nobody. Luo Ho Xiaoming thought for a while and shook his head. I've never heard of it. Such a cultivation method should not be unknown. Then it could only be a new creation. Moreover, it was only passed on to him, or it was created for him. I'm really a little envious of your luck. Isn't that your father? My father plows the fields. That's my big brother. Li Qingshan laughed and waved his hand. Devour Little Fatty. Chapter 1265. Deep Blue Fatty seemed to have been impatient for a long time, but without Li Qingshan's will, it could not surpass its instincts to attack its own kind. Now that it was finally authorized, it immediately opened its mouth and swallowed the dazzling star made of earth, fire, wind, water. The balance of the star was instantly broken. The earth cracked, the fire burned violently, the wind blew, and the flood surged. A world that was about to be born was destroyed. Deep Blue Fatty's body was instantly expanded by more than 10 times, almost losing its original shape as if it was about to burst. The earth, fire, wind, and water were not really water and fire, but the purest energy, the original substance of the world. Even great cultivators and monster kings in the face of this scene were as helpless as mortals in the face of a natural disaster. Li Qingshan and the other 2 hid in an unknown organ in Deep Blue. Separated by a transparent membrane, they gazed at the soul-stirring sight in the stomach. They all sighed in amazement, as well as comprehending some things. This void-swallowing beast is huge, so the world it created must be huge too. Can you, Little Fatty, digest it? Luo Ho Xiaoming endured the discomfort of the name and expressed his concern. Li Qingshan answered, Even a god like you doesn't know. How would I know? It's about to become Big Fatty. All right, I think it's better to call him Little Fatty. Luo Ho Xiaoming felt that his tolerance for these stupid names was limited. Li Qingshan looked pleased. You finally have some taste for names. Little Ming. Luo Ho Xiaoming's eyes twitched. Li Qingshan, you and I will fight. Gu Yenying interrupted there. I fight. We were lucky. Without Little Fatty, even if we killed the big swallowing beast, we wouldn't be able to withstand such an explosion of energy. We would still be dead. Li Qingshan said, It's not just luck. If we didn't eat those little void-swallowing beasts, little Fatty wouldn't have been able to swallow this star. At this time, the violent energy torrent gradually calmed down, like water being sucked dry by a sponge. In the small world, be it on the surface or in the deep sea, whether it was active or not. Or did he take advantage of the situation for a long time? All the volcanoes erupted at the same time. Lava and underground fire gushed out, and billowing black smoke rushed into the sky. Strong winds swept across the entire world. Gales, storms, tornadoes. It surged between heaven and earth, but it could not blow away the dark clouds that covered the sky. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Torrential rain poured down like a torrent. Floodwaters overflowed and surged wantonly. This doomsday-like scene made even the most arrogant and ferocious martial artists tremble. The ship was like a toy, being tossed up high by the waves and falling back down heavily, passing through the mountain-like waves. He felt as if he was sailing in the deep sea. Wu Taizhan personally manned the helm, but it was useless. The pirates behind him kept shouting, "Chivalrous lord, spare us!" He couldn't help but think, could it be that my mother lied to me? Am I really her son? My dear father, stop messing around. Bang! A huge wave smashed the ship into pieces. Wooden fragments filled the sky, as well as countless rare treasures. Wu Taizhan took a deep breath and found the statue of the woman. He leaped over and carried the statue into the sea. Li Qingshan didn't have the time to care about the changes in the small world. He wasn't the goddess of mercy who saved people from suffering. Everyone had their own fates. He was focused on how Deep Blue Little Fatty was sending the earth, fire, wind, and water back to the small world. When Deep Blue Little Fatty was devouring the small, space-devouring beasts, he tried to figure this out, but he couldn't see anything similar to a teleportation gate. It was the same now. There seemed to be an invisible channel between Deep Blue Little Fatty and the small world. It connected them together in a way that he couldn't understand. It was even closer than the connection between him and his mirror image, just like how the 6 paths of reincarnation could connect all the worlds. After a while, the earth, fire, wind, and water disappeared. Deep Blue Little Fatty grew much bigger and more active. Li Qingshan shook his head. There were too many mysteries in the world. Perhaps he could only find the answers after he reached the 9 heavens. Fortunately, he didn't have to worry about losing contact with his mirror image anymore. He felt like he was still in the small world. The connection between him and his mirror image became very clear again. However, he felt a little regretful. It's a pity that I'm not strong enough. Otherwise, if I could absorb the earth, fire, wind, and water, I would be able to push the 4 transformations to unimaginable heights. However, it's all in the small world. I can keep it and slowly absorb it. Perhaps the small world couldn't be called a small world anymore. Not only had it become 10 times bigger, but the flow of time had also become much faster. Although it still couldn't compare to the 9 provinces, when it completely digested everything it had devoured, it would be able to accommodate a second heavenly tribulation. In the deep void, the great space-devouring beast was floating in the darkness, looking for new food. Suddenly, its body contorted violently and began to crumble, revealing Deep Blue Little Fatty within. Gu Yenying said, "The great space-devouring beast is dead. We've succeeded." Luo Ho Xiaoming also breathed a sigh of relief. They had finally escaped. Furthermore, their journey from now on was very secure. With the great space-devouring beast as a mount, there was almost no need to worry about any danger. Li Qingshan looked at the pieces of the great space-devouring beast's corpse floating in the void. He rubbed his chin and said, "Do you guys think that if we stay here, will we attract more great space-devouring beasts?" This was a very profitable business. The larger the small world became, the more abundant and pure spiritual chi he could obtain, and Deep Blue Little Fatty would also become stronger. Perhaps he could go to the demon domain in the future and devour Cheong Chi. Then he wouldn't have to worry about the 500-year promise anymore. Luo Ho Xiaoming mocked, "That's not something you can decide." As they spoke, Deep Blue Little Fatty had already started to eat, ignoring Li Qingshan's attempts to stop it. It devoured the great space-devouring beast's corpse in large mouthfuls. When the great space-devouring beast was destroyed, it was no longer seen as one of its kind. Although Li Qingshan could make the great space-devouring beast surpass its own instincts to attack its own kind with his status as the world god, he couldn't suppress its instinct to devour anything. After all, it was not an obedient pet. Li Qingshan shrugged. "Gluttons are always hard to stop, but we don't have the time to do that anyway. If we stay here any longer, little, and we'll get anxious. All right, let's return to the flight path first." Using the stars in the sky, he deduced his current location. In order to maintain the balance of the 5 powers in his body, he had no choice but to suppress his own power, causing his overall strength to weaken. Only his deduction ability had become stronger, which was a pleasant surprise. A moment later, Li Qingshan said, "Little Fatty, start the teleportation." In the blink of an eye, Deep Blue Little Fatty appeared millions of miles away, back where they had been devoured by the great space-devouring beast. Floating astronomy. Chapter 1266. Gu Yenying said, "It's really convenient. I can save some energy." Luo Ho Xiaoming said, "The void-swallowing beast was born in the void and grew up in the void. Even if the Kuan Peng had the power to travel through the void, it wouldn't be so comfortable." Li Qingshan said, "You two will be home soon." Luo Ho Xiaoming sneered, "Home?" Gu Yenying smiled, "Home. Even a bird needs a piece of sky. I admit that the 9 provinces is a bit small, but it's still better than here." Gu Yenying tilted her head and thought for a moment. "That makes sense." Li Qingshan pressed Luo Ho Xiaoming's shoulder. "And you'll go home sooner or later and take back everything that belongs to you." Luo Ho Xiaoming frowned, then smiled again. "That's right. Don't forget to help me when the time comes." "Sure, but you'll probably have to help me fight first." Li Qingshan reached out his hand. Many years later, in the Azura field, Li Qingshan had made the same request for the same enemy, the hungry ghost realm. And this time, Luo Ho Xiaoming readily agreed. "No problem." He also reached out his hand. The 2 hands, one big and one small, held each other tightly. This was the meaning of a man's promise, a common enemy. Gu Yenying suddenly had a feeling that perhaps each other was their biggest gain, and this was also her gain. Because of different fates, she found people who could support each other. This was a great fortune. Li Qingshan shook his head and sighed, "But you're too useless now." Luo Ho Xiaoming said angrily, "Say that again." But he felt the billowing spiritual energy coming from the big hand, and he couldn't help but be stunned. Li Qingshan said seriously, "The small world has become bigger, and the spiritual energy has become more abundant. Other than deducing the path, I don't need so much spiritual energy for now. From now on, I'll do my best to help you raise your cultivation. What do you think?" Gu Yenying didn't say anything. She stretched out her hand, and her slender fingers felt as sharp as an eagle's claw. Li Qingshan gently held her hand. Their eyes met. His tiger eyes were like fire, and his eagle eyes were like lightning. None of them were willing to retreat. Luo Ho Xiaoming rolled his eyes. He closed his eyes. Gu Yenying closes her eyes and starts to refine the Reiki. Li Qingshan smiled triumphantly and began to deduce the next path with all his might. He no longer mobilized just the spirit turtle's power. Instead, It was the newborn world within his body. This was the true secret behind the improvement of his deduction ability, because it originated from the 9 transformations of demons and gods. Li Qingshan named it the heart of the gods and demons. In the small world, the sun was shining brightly, and the blue sky was filled with white clouds. The seagulls were chirping, and the atmosphere was peaceful. Even the sea regained its calmness. The long and winding coastline was full of debris that was swept up by the waves. Wu Taizhan carried the heavy statue and walked to the beach step by step. He fell to the ground in exhaustion, but he forced himself to stand up and looked around. Where is this? I don't remember there being such a big island in the nearby sea, and it's so barren. The woman's statue's moving voice resounded in his mind. This is not an island, but a continent. Wu Taizhan was used to seeing many strange things on the sea. A statue that could talk did not seem too strange to him. Impossible. There is only one continent in the world. Wait, since there can be a new island, why can't there be a new continent? At this time, the plants on the barren land began to sprout and grow at a speed visible to the naked eye. The woman statue was also silent. She was born in the apocalypse, and the spiritual energy was scarce. This was an aura she had never felt before. The spiritual energy might not be pure, but it was full of vitality, like a newborn baby with endless possibilities. Above the vast sea, a new continent was formed. It was more than 10 times bigger than the original continent, and it was quickly dyed with a new layer of green. Sigh. The many islands have already made this sea full of bloodshed, and now a new continent has appeared. This is really, really great. Long live the Hero King. The woman statue asked, "Who is the Hero King that you keep talking about?" "The greatest person in history." The woman statue was silent again. Thinking about it, he was just a powerful native of this small world. How could he be considered a great person? However, it was I, a native, who saved you. Who are you? The woman statue asked. She did not expect that someone could directly pry into her mind. "I am Li Qingshan." Li Qingshan was originally observing the changes in the small world, and the vitality that sprouted on the new continent made him understand something. Among the 3 remaining shadows in his sea of consciousness, another shadow gradually protruded. He immediately held his breath, waiting for the new change of the 9 transformations of demons and gods. But perhaps his understanding wasn't enough. The shadow didn't really appear in the end. Li Qingshan did not feel disappointed, because he could feel that the seed had already been planted, and it was only a matter of time before it sprouted. Right now, he had a heart of demons and gods that needed to be tempered and grown, so he was not in a hurry to learn the new changes. Because Wu Taishan and this woman statue were the first visitors of this new continent, and they were existences that he had paid attention to, he took a glance and heard the woman's thoughts. The woman statue said, "So you have become the god of this world, but even a god shouldn't have this kind of power. Normal gods naturally don't have it. Fellow Taoist, please help me get rid of this state. What can you repay me with? Up until now, you haven't even said a word of thanks." "Thank you. I will definitely repay you. You know that I didn't lie to you." Li Qingshan couldn't help but admire this woman's temperament. In a situation where there was no hope, everyone would panic or be angry or resentful, but she was able to use this to increase her persuasiveness. But a person's heart can change. The great Hero King, the god of this world, are you afraid that I will go back on my words? Hey, just now, you are still a native. Do you mind if I get to know you? It's mainly to understand your world. The woman hesitated for a moment, then said, "Please." After going through this desperate situation, she just wanted to start over, treating it as a dragon in shallow water being teased by shrimps. Just now, Li Qingshan had been struggling to survive. so he didn't have time to pay attention to the islands formed by the fragments of the world. At this moment, his mind swept through the archipelago, and at the same time, he went deep into the woman's mind, and two pieces of information appeared in his mind. It was a world that was one level larger than the 9 provinces, and cultivators had to go through 5 heavenly tribulations to be able to ascend. However, as the end of the world was approaching, and the spiritual chi was weak, there were very few cultivators who could go through 2 or 3 heavenly tribulations, let alone 5. But this woman had gone through 4 heavenly tribulations, and was known as Stone Empress. Whether in terms of talent, bloodline, or willpower, she was a top-notch cultivator. If it wasn't for the fact that the connection with the 6 paths of reincarnation was completely cut off when the world declined, she even had the chance to ascend and become Stone Empress, but the result could only be considered as bad luck. But now, it seemed that even her luck was very good, and that was why she could come back from death's door in such an incredible way. She was the only survivor of that world. Although that world had declined, the cultivation path had developed to the extreme. Whether in terms of quality or quantity, it was far above the 9 provinces, and it contained a lot of valuable knowledge. Originally, he was just picking up trash, but he didn't expect to find a treasure. Floating astronomy. Oh, what is it? Records of the imperial supremacy of the world. Sounds good. Tell me more about it. Our world's #1 sect is called the Imperial Supremacy Temple. The records of the imperial supremacy of the world is the ultimate technique of the Imperial Supremacy Temple. When cultivated to the highest level, not only can one pass through 5 heavenly tribulations, but they can also reach the peak of 5 heavenly tribulations. That is why it is called the Imperial Supremacy, one of the top cultivation techniques in the world. Normally, it would surpass the power limit of the world. Because ascenders also had the chance to communicate with this world, there would be some stronger cultivation techniques. Moreover, in the long river of time, there would be all kinds of coincidences, such as the reincarnation of celestial beings. Li Qingshan remembered that in the 3 graves 5 classics of the Great Xia dynasty should be a cultivation technique of this level. Perhaps it was slightly weaker, but within the same level, there would be no difference in essence. After all, Empress Stoneheart's world had developed for so many years, and it was 1 level higher than the 9 provinces. Could it be that it was also at this level? Is there anything better? For example, a cultivation technique that can pass through 6 heavenly tribulations. Empress Stoneheart said, "My friend, don't be greedy. After 4 heavenly tribulations, you can form a yin spirit. After 5 heavenly tribulations, you can form a yang spirit just now. If you want to pass 6 heavenly tribulations, you need to combine yin and yang and form a primordial spirit. Then you can be called a mortal deity. If you are a Buddhist, you have already achieved the avatar fruit and are only 1 level away from the arhat fruit. You will completely transcend the mortal world, and after death, you will no longer be born in the realm of desire. This level is not something we can understand." Li Qingshan remembered that the avatar fruit was the 3rd fruit of the 4 fruits of arhat. After 4 heavenly tribulations, you would be called the 1st fruit arhat, also known as the Sudrahuan fruit. Sudrahuan meant to enter the realm of immortality. If he were to compare it with the schools in his previous life, the refinement of qi could be regarded as a preschool. The 3 levels after that were elementary monk, middle monk, and high monk. Only after passing the 4th heavenly tribulation could one be regarded as a great monk. With a clear goal and direction, all the previous training could be said to be preparation for this step. As for the 2nd fruit, it was called Situa Hamako. Taking it 1 step further, one could be considered a research monk. If one could attain the 3rd fruit, Anagami, That would be incredible. A dignified professorial monk would be looked up to wherever he went, much higher than a research monk. If they were to fight, he would not be the one to die. However, his demand for the quality and quantity of spiritual energy was much higher than that of a normal cultivator. The quality of the spiritual energy in the small world is still too low. There are too many impurities. You don't need to supply it to me anymore. Wait until you return to the 9 states and go through the 3rd heavenly tribulation. Li Qingshan also agreed. Cultivators had to ascend to a higher and bigger world to obtain a more suitable environment for cultivation. Right, I've just obtained 2 new cultivation techniques. Help me look at them. The Extreme King's Records of the World and the Extreme King's Records of World Destruction. They are a bit similar to the path of the Great Lord of Freedom, but their levels are too far apart. The Great Lord of Freedom controls destruction and prosperity. Compared to him, these 2 cultivation techniques are a bit worse than death. However, from a mortal's point of view, they are quite good. They have reached the peak of mortals, and it is rare that they contain a hint of the great destruction intent. If I hadn't experienced the destruction of the world, I would not have been able to reach this level. Li Qingshan listened carefully and learned a lot. A god's knowledge was indeed extraordinary, but the key was the height they possessed. At this time, Gu Yening also stopped cultivating. She also said that the spiritual energy in the small world was not very useful. It could be maintained, but it would be difficult for her to improve. Li Qingshan clapped his hands. All right, cultivation ends here. Let's set off immediately. Our final destination is the 9 states. Deep Blue's fat tail swayed, creating layers of ripples. It glided forward for tens of thousands of miles and suddenly disappeared into the void. To be continued. She had always been a monster that could strike fear into the living, the dead, or even all self-aware existences, which was why he was in such a hurry to destroy her. A while later, the monk kings returned to the surface and gathered beside the left imperial advisor. Imperial advisor, the enemy of Buddha has probably already left this region. The enemy of Buddha is skilled at hiding her aura, so it's truly difficult to find her. Should we ask the imperial astronomer to help us find her? The imperial astronomer was skilled at divining the heavenly secrets and investigating fate. The head of the imperial astronomer was the leader of the school of Inyam. The enemy of Buddha is a monster that's neither alive nor dead. Capturing her through the heavenly secrets and fate probably won't be easy. Why don't we try? We can't just let her go like this. The monk kings discussed among themselves. The left imperial advisor listened in silence before suddenly asking, "Dauntless, do you have any clues?" The dauntless monk was stern. He said nothing the entire time. With that, he brought his palms together and bowed. No, imperial advisor. Although he knew she was the enemy of Buddha, his grievances with the Chan monastery of Devanaga could not be explained in a few words. Coupled with how he was currently thinking about how to save the unraging monk, he really did not have any. However, if he really did have any clues, he definitely would not hide it. The left imperial advisor frowned. Right now, the imperial astronomer was dealing with something major, so it was impossible for them to split their attention to help him search for her. This matter was extremely important. Even the invasion of the hungry ghost realm had to wait, let alone a measly enemy of Buddha. As a result, he led the monk kings to expand the search area, searching in all directions. They expanded the search area to a radius of 10,000 kilometers, but they still found nothing. The left imperial advisor said, "The enemy of Buddha is heavily injured, so she must find a place to heal. Who does she trust the most?" The dauntless monk said, "Li Qingshan." Probably only Li Qingshan. It's that wretched demon who fought against the crown prince of Siqing, the Unraging's good disciple. Where is that wretched demon right now? I don't know. You don't know? Ever since her battle against the king of Feathermen, Bai Chun, she vanished. Perhaps she's no longer in this world. I remember that the wretched demon and the enemy of Buddha have a dwelling in the Chain Mountains within the Rui Commandery of the Green Province, the left imperial advisor said in thought. In order to hunt down and kill the enemy of Buddha, he had made sufficient preparations. However, that's only a small mountain. Its spiritual qi is weak, so it's been abandoned a long time ago. It's nowhere near enough to defend against her. The dauntless monk understood the geography of the Green Province. Let alone a small mountain, even the entire Chain Mountains were not a particularly good place for cultivation. In the past, all the famed mountains and great rivers had been occupied by sects of various sizes, which was why cultivators established dwellings there. Now that the Green Province had suffered repeated disasters, many mountains and rivers had been emptied out. It had been a long time since cultivators went there, and it was not like she was an idiot. Instead, she was the cultivator with the greatest ability for comprehension he had ever seen, so why would she remain in such an obvious place? It was exactly because the left imperial advisor knew this, that he did not rush off to the Chain Mountains immediately. The other monk kings also found it impossible. Perhaps the Banyan Tree King is protecting her, or maybe it's the city amongst the clouds. She might still be deep underground, hiding in the flames of the earth. The interference from the underground magnetic field is too great, so we can't find her. The left imperial advisor said, the enemy of Buddha cannot tolerate all living beings. She won't believe these people, and it's even more impossible for her to remain deep underground in her current state. He made up his mind. Let's go to the Chain Mountains. Home wasn't it the safest place for people? It was the only place where they could find comfort after suffering all the pain in the outside world. Among the undulating mountains, this lonely little peak seemed so ordinary. However, the 3 words Qingzhao's home on the stone wall retained an unforgettable memory. This was their home. Floating astronomy. Chapter 1270. Outside the commandery city of Rui, the headquarters of the Hawkwolf Guard. The eagle spread its wings on top of the white robe, and a silver eagle emblem hung on the waist. This was Gu Yeniying's attire that never changed. It was also the uniform of one of the 3 pillars of the Rui Commandery, the White Hawk Commander. Gu Yeniying had already left for a long time, and the imperial daughter Si Bao had also been summoned back to the imperial court. The current successor was still a woman, the only disciple of Gu Yeniying, the former White Wolf Commander, and the current White Eagle Commander, Qian Rongji, as she stood with her hands behind her back. She vaguely resembled Gu Yeniying's bearing in the past, but her awe-inspiring presence completely surpassed Gu Yeniying's. As she practiced the illustrations of the Naraka, the venomous snake Hell had gradually merged with her. He seemed more like a disciple of legalism. All the White Wolf Guards were especially careful in front of her, even though she seemed even more magnanimous than Gu Yeniying. She quietly guarded the communication circle, waiting for news from the south. A gorgeous little snake crawled up from her collar and slithered along her neck to her cheek, hissing and flicking its tongue. However, there was a second one, a third one. In the blink of an eye, her face, which could be considered beautiful, was filled with snakes that danced and tangled with each other, becoming extremely terrifying. The hissing sounds rising and falling in the darkness were even more chilling. The veins on her neck bulged. Hell's torture wasn't ordinary, but she didn't move at all. Only a pair of eyes could be seen on her face. They also turned into snake eyes that flickered faintly. They were even colder and more vicious than the snakes of hell. The door to the communication room suddenly opened, and a ray of sunlight shone in. The eagle token shone with a silvery luster. Her brows wrinkled, not her orders. No one could disturb him except for one person. A handsome man leaned against the door frame, his smile brighter than the sun. "Rongji, is there any news?" Rongji turned around and faced Lin Xian with her terrifying face. "Commander Lin, please refer to me as Commander in the Hawkwolf Guard." Anyone who saw such a face would be startled, but Lin Xian's smile did not change. In fact, there was even a hint of gentleness and pity in it. Cultivating like this is too tiring. Rongji stared at him with a pair of snake eyes, as if trying to see through his sincerity. "But why are you so concerned about this little?" And Lin Xian asked curiously. All these years, she had been paying attention to the news of the enemy of Buddha through various channels, but there had never been any contact between them. Rongji said, "It has nothing to do with you." At this moment, the communication array flashed. Rongji turned around and silently accepted the information. "The Banyan Tree King has failed to attack the tower. The Gate of Hungry Ghosts has expanded further. And the Dark Queen has been captured." Her expression suddenly changed. The left imperial preceptor and the monk kings had successfully ambushed the enemy of Buddha. The enemy of Buddha retreated with heavy injuries, and his whereabouts were unknown. She thought for a moment, and suddenly turned to walk out of the door, brushing past Lin Xian. "Don't follow me." Lin Xian stopped in his tracks. As he watched her disappear into the horizon, his smile was still bright and beautiful, but it was filled with helplessness. A few white wolf guards passing by teased him, "Commander, aren't you going to chase after her?" He waved his hand. "Go away, or I'll send you south to attack the Gate of Hungry Ghosts." The white wolf guards walked away with a smile. They were clearly not afraid of this friendly white wolf commander. He walked towards the communication array, and his eyes turned cold. Rongji smiled. "You still remember Chu Tian? He's still alive. He's called Lin Xian now." Little An's calm words were like a bolt of lightning striking Rongji's heart. She muttered, "So that's how it is. So that's how it is. Why didn't you tell me before?" Qingshan didn't let me. Little An pursed her lips and revealed a rare human-like expression. Therefore, Rongji couldn't blame her for hiding it in the past at all. "Okay, then why are you saying it now?" He didn't think that she had the concept of gratitude. Even if she did, she probably wouldn't go against Li Qingshan's wishes for such a small matter. "I'm going to do something that Qingshan doesn't want me to do." Little An's expression was a bit gloomy as he looked at the ground. "I don't know if he will forgive me. Is this all for him?" "Yes. Then he will definitely forgive you." "Really? It's true. Thank you. I'm leaving now." Little An's gratitude was more sincere. "What about you?" "I want to stay a little longer." "Yes." Little An left, leaving Rongji muttering to herself, "Chu Tian, Lin Xian, Chu Tian, Lin Xian." A smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. The smile gradually widened into a chuckle. Then it turned into a mournful laugh. Finally, it turned into a hysterical laugh. The snakes all over her body danced wildly, enjoying the taste of pain as they drowned her. Floating astronomy. Chapter 1272. The silver moonlight shone on the golden wheat field. Fireflies flashed by the pond, reflected on the black water, as if they were shining with the stars. A white figure suddenly slid across the black water surface. It was so quiet that it was like a ghost. Even the fireflies were not disturbed by it. She walked through the wheat field in midsummer. The air was filled with the smell of harvest. They did not understand the war of cultivators. As long as they could survive, Mortals would live their own lives year after year. The pale and slender hand drew across the sharp wheat light. She kept her head up, her ethereal eyes looking at the sky, as if she wanted to count the number of stars, and as if she was looking for an answer. Whoosh! A refreshing summer wind blew. The wheat waves undulated, and her seaweed-like long hair floated behind her. The sparks were far away in the sky. There was no answer. So she looked at the village in the distance. The golden wheat light pierced her fingertip, and a drop of blood fell, turning into a pale spark that fell on the wheat field, spreading silently. In the blink of an eye, the undulating wheat waves turned into a sea of fire. The wheat field did not burn, but it lost its color and became pale. There was no longer any vitality, and it returned to absolute silence. The white flame passed through the pond, and the fireflies also dimmed. They fell into the black water, creating ripples. The fire was ignited like a fierce night wind. It spread over the mountains, crossed the rivers, and passed through the villages and cities. In the quiet village, a sleeping child was having a sweet dream. He pursed his lips and turned over. The pale flame touched his forehead, and he merged into the fire. In the old town, the dying old man endured the torment of his illness. He could not sleep, and he longed for the continuation of his life. The pale flame reflected in his turbid eyes. The pain soon disappeared, and he became a light flame together with his life. In the sturdy city, the brothel was having a merry night. The lights were bright, and the music was played. The drunkard scolded and laughed tirelessly. The beggar outside the door looked at the rich guests coming in and out. He wanted to go forward, but did not dare. He wanted to retreat, but did not want to. He dodged between the lights. Unknowingly, he spent his life. The pale flame flowed in and out. The lights were still bright, and the laughter was still in his ears, but the music had ended. In the pale wheat field, she twisted her waist, causing her clothes to flutter in the wind. Her footsteps were light, and her hand gestures changed. She controlled the prairie fire as if she was dancing to her heart's content. Only the stars were facing each other. Men and women, wise and foolish, kind and evil, rich and poor, hopeless and hopeful, painful and joyous. All of these things had once been like the difference between clouds and mud, but now they were all equal in this dance. However, all living beings were not equal. Even in the face of death, there would always be cultivators who were unwilling to accept their fate. They wanted to surpass all living beings, occupying famed mountains and blessed lands, laying down great formations to stabilize the mountain gates. Not even the pale, white flames could invade. Standing under the silver moonlight, she turned around and raised her arms. The bell trembled, her black hair fluttered, and her prayer beads scattered. She disappeared into the mountains. With a thought, the sword light soared, twisting and turning before disappearing into the void. Thus, the mountain gate was broken, the great battle formation was destroyed, and all living beings were wiped out. When the sun rose from the east, there were no longer any living beings within a radius of 1,000 miles, whether it was the tiniest insect or the strongest cultivator. He said in pity, "Little and, oh little, and do you really want to be so obstinate?" The left imperial advisor asked, "Do you know your crime?" "It is the imperial preceptor's fault." The left imperial advisor laughed from extreme anger. "You've really fallen too deeply into the demonic path." The unraging monk said furiously, "If the enemy of Buddha is here, I'm willing to perish with her and save the common people." However, if the imperial advisor had attacked and destroyed the ghost tower earlier, instead of acting like a despicable person and launching a sneak attack, would it have come to this? Despicable person. What a despicable person. You don't understand the bigger picture. You don't understand the bigger picture. Do you think you can perish with the enemy of Buddha just because you're dead? The hungry ghost realm wants her. If she doesn't die, the hungry ghost realm will never give up. I've been reading Buddhist scriptures ever since. I've only heard about the Buddha cutting off his flesh to feed eagles and feeding tigers with his body. I've never heard about the Buddha setting up ambushes and hunting eagles and tigers. I've never learned about the bigger picture or the bigger picture either. As the imperial advisor, you should have set an example and let the Buddhists of the world understand the spirit of Buddhism instead of scheming and calculating, only considering the pros and cons. My death might be useless, but there are still countless fellow disciples, arhats, and bodhisattvas. The hungry ghost realm might not give up, but even if the 9 provinces perish, there are still the 3,000 worlds and the 6 paths of Sasra. Even if there are countless disasters, as long as the Buddhist Dharma is not twisted, the eternal lamp can never be extinguished and illuminate all life. The true enemy of Buddha is not in the outside world, but in our hearts. The unraging monk was heavily restrained, but a grand aura filled the hall right now. There would always be some fools who firmly believed in the principles in the books, refusing to turn back even if they ran into the world and bled. Even if they sullied themselves with alcohol and meat and stood against demon folk, it would not extinguish their will. Shut up. Why, you're an evil demon who distorts the Buddhist Dharma. What do you understand about the spirit of Buddhism? I don't understand, but if the Buddha is like the imperial advisor, launching sneak attacks and setting up ambushes, I'm willing to run into the Buddha statue and die. I'll strip you of your identity as the monk king right now, drag me away, and punish me with 3,000 strikes. The sun set and dusk. A short day passed by, followed by another long night. Fellow cultivators, reinforcements from the Dragon Province won't be coming. If we want to deal with the enemy of Buddha, we can only rely on ourselves. As the governor of the Yong Province, I have the responsibility to protect my territory. We must fight. If anyone doesn't want to take this risk, feel free to leave. I won't force you to stay. The governor of the Yong Province said to the dignitaries sternly. Behind him stood the abbot Xioshan. None of the dignitaries said anything about retreating. They were all born and raised in the Yong Province. Even though they were extremely distant from mortals, if all the mortals died, where would there be cultivators? The legacies of their sects would be severed too. Please give us your orders, Your Majesty. The governor of the Yong Province took out the mental map of the Yong Province. This is all we can do, deep in the night. The great cultivators of the dignitaries were scattered in the sky above the Yong Province. They formed groups of 2 to 3 people and monitored the entire province. Once they discovered the enemy of Buddha, they would not be in a hurry to strike. Instead, they would send out messages and gather people so that they could deal a fatal blow to the enemy of Buddha. The governor of the Yong Province stood on the platform of the Black Dragon King to observe the aura and control the overall situation. Fortunately, the Yong Province was slightly smaller than the Green Province. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for them to monitor everything if it was as large as the Frost Province or the Mist Province. However, the Mist Province was the Banyan Tree King's home base. The Frost Province was frigid and sparsely populated, so she had never made it her first choice. Your Majesty, there's fire in the east. The governor of the Yong Province received the news and immediately gazed towards the east. Sure enough, the morale of the people had declined. Is it still in the east? Right when he was about to gather the dignitaries and set off for the east, another piece of news arrived. Your Majesty, there's fire in the northwest too. There's fire in the south too. For a moment, the samadhi flames of white bone lit up everywhere in the Yong Province. Having recovered their strength, the skeleton demons leapt about on the plains as they cackled. They were like kindling that set the forests and towns alight. The governor of the Yong province hesitated, attempting to determine the true location of the enemy of Buddha through aura observation. The abbot, who had remained silent the entire time, suddenly said, "Your Majesty, I sense that the formation around Mound Hill Temple has been breached. The enemy of Buddha is in Mound Hill Temple." "How is that possible?" Even the Black Dragon King struggles to get through the Heavenly King's earth-blanketing formation of Mound Hill Temple. "I don't know. The enemy is in Mound Hill Temple. Please send reinforcements immediately." "Oh no, the enemy of Buddha wants to open the demon cavern and draw demon folk in." Chapter 1274. Mound Hill Temple's status in the Harmony Province was equivalent to the Chan Monastery of Devanaga in the Green Province. It was even much more ancient than the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. It was a standard 10,000-year-old monastery. There were many pagodas and palaces in the temple built on a rolling hill. The so-called Mount Bhikkhu was naturally not as simple as turning a hill upside down, but referring to the Mount of Bhikkhu. The Heavenly King of the Heavenly King covers the earth formation was referring to the Dhritarashtra of the East, a renowned guardian general of the Buddhist League. As such, this formation was naturally indestructible. Tonight, in order to deal with the enemy of Buddha, all the monk kings in the temple had come out, so no one was worried about a sneak attack here. Little and climbed to the top of the mountain and looked down at the hill temple that was illuminated by the Buddha's light. He gripped the celestial abandoned sword tightly and leaped down. He became one with the sword in the air and turned into a curved sword gleam that pierced into Mound Hill Temple. There were very few spells in this world that could block the sharpness of the abandoned immortal sword. No matter how strong the spell was, it was as easy as a needle piercing through cowhide. However, if he were to enter, he would only be placing himself in danger. It would not be easy to destroy this formation from the inside. Once the controller of the formation returned, he would immediately fall into a dangerous situation. As a result, no matter how much the soaring Locust King resented the Chan Monastery of Devanaga, he had never launched an attack against Great Buddha Mountain. A beam of golden light leaped across the horizon. Abbot Shoshan rushed over at full speed. He had already started activating the formation from afar. At the same time, he sent a telepathic message to all the Shangqing cultivators. "The enemy is at Shoshan Temple. Please come to our rescue." All of a sudden, the alarm bells in the temple rang, and the projection of the Dhritarashtra appeared indistinctly. He had a dignified face and was holding a pipa. Gazing at the sword light, the pipa rang. The sword light froze, but the abandoned immortal sword was not so easily restrained. It wriggled like a fish and shot toward the foot of the Heavenly King's illusion. That was the core of the formation. It was also the largest hill in the temple, and on top of it sat the Hall of Great Strength. Is the enemy of Buddha walking into a trap? Abbot Shoshan was surprised and delighted. However, when he saw the curved sword gleam disappear into the hill, he suddenly understood. Not good. The enemy of the Buddha wants to open the demon cavern and draw demon folk in. The Mound Hill Temple had another similarity to the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. It also suppressed a huge demon cavern right below the Grand Hall. Suddenly, the hill shook violently. It was as if a giant beast was about to turn over. All the wells on the mountain were boiling. Dozens of streams of black demonic chi gushed out of the well. The forsaken immortal sword's soul said, "How ironic! At that time, you tried everything to stop me from opening the demon's den. But you are indeed the master I am most satisfied with. aside from your swordsmanship being slightly lacking. He isn't any weaker than that Wujue old ghost, and the things he does are much more interesting. Back then, it was the forsaken immortal sword that had broken the seal and opened the demonic den in Qingzhou. Little and didn't say anything. He waved his sword again, and a third of the thousands of intertwining iron chains broke. More devil chi gushed out. Fo Buddha, stop! Abbot Qiushan's angry roar rushed into the darkness of the hill, like the roar of millions of lions. The restless devils in the devil's den were shocked. Chapter 1275. The moonlight was like water, and the shadows of the trees danced. Little and stood in the forest of pagodas. To her, this was the largest treasury in the entire Yongzhou. Though the return of the head Abbot Qiushan had caused some trouble, it was still within their expectations. It was better to say that it was a good thing. In the words of the Green Mountain, it was revenge. Of course, she did not have such feelings at all. She did not even feel the slightest bit of hatred towards the left advisor who had ambushed her. Everything was as it should be. Nothing had ever been as it should be. There was no need to be conflicted between Buddhism and the demonic, nor was there a need to consider what was right or wrong. In the words of the Path of White Bone and Great Beauty, it was a vow of endless worries. But did this mean that there were no more troubles? Whoosh! A large golden sword slashed towards her from behind, but she did not even turn her head as she swung the Buddha's slaying sword. Clang! The blades crossed, and the Buddha's slaying sword cut deeply into the golden sword. The Bodhisattva statue holding the sword immediately lost its luster and collapsed to the ground. Even the weapon in its hand could not withstand the Buddha slaying sword. At this time, more than 10 golden statues surrounded him again. The sword light flashed and drew a zigzag trajectory in the air. 3 heads flew into the air. She became one with her sword and broke out of the encirclement. She conveniently cut open a stupa and took out the relic within. Holding it in her palm, it immediately ignited and turned into the samadhi flame of white bone. Boom! The stupa in front of her was smashed into pieces. An enraged, tiger-subduing, golden body Luohan reached out its arms to grab her. Behind her, a gust of wind rose again, attacking her from both front and back. She threw herself into the arms of the golden body of the crouching tiger Arhot, the Buddha slaying sword in her left hand slightly retracted. The golden body of tiger-subduing Luohan had a sword mark on its palm. It immediately stopped. She smashed the tiger-vanquishing Arhot golden body into pieces. She threw out the abandoned immortal sword with her right hand. The sword light was like a wandering evil dragon. It flew around her body and pierced through the golden statues. Kill Buddha and defend Immortal Abandon's attack. The 2 swords performed the Sword of Heaven and Earth Hidden Sword spell, which was extremely similar but also completely different. They interweaved into a sword net, and none of the golden statues could block her sword, and none of the golden statues could even touch the corner of her clothes. Boom, 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 boom. She shuttled through the pagoda forest, and the golden statue followed closely behind. The pagodas collapsed one after another. She casually took out several sarairas. Fusing with the white bones, it became faster and stronger. Finally, the entire forest of towers collapsed. The sarairas of all the eminent monks in the past 10,000 years had all been collected by her, in her originally empty eyes. At this moment, it was burning with raging flames. Looking back, there were still more than a dozen golden statues chasing after him. He turned around and faced the attack. His nimble sword light danced like flowing lights. It disappeared in a flash in the darkness. Returning to his original position, the dozen or so golden statues behind him all stood motionless and slowly collapsed. Invincible Buddha, seeing the pagoda forest destroyed. Abbot Qiushan's eyes widened in anger, but he could not leave the hall of great strength. After losing the forest of pagodas, the formation of the Heavenly King's devastation shook even more. Countless roars and howls rang out from beneath his feet, as if a group of ghosts from hell were slamming against the gates of hell. Only then did he hear the bell ring. He felt his chest ache. Lowering his head, he saw a skeleton that he had not smashed to pieces. It held a sword in its hand, plunging it deeply into his chest. The golden lion vanished, only leaving Abbot Qiushan behind. He wanted to blow himself up and take down the enemy of the Buddha with him, but he was unable to do so. He was filled with resentment and reluctance. How can the orthodox Dharma of Buddhism be so restrained? How can it be so restrained? If it were not for the Buddha's slaying sword, the great Buddha would have been able to force her into submission. If it were not for the blood sea banner, the formation of the Heavenly King covers the earth would not have collapsed so quickly. The skeleton demon, who did not directly participate in the battle, also distracted the attention of the king of Yong province. The abandoned immortal sword played an even greater role. It first broke through the protective formation, then broke through the seal of the demon's lair, and killed the golden statues, as if they were dogs. She unleashed the power of each transcendent artifact to the extreme. She took advantage of the weakness and struck a fatal blow. Little and did not reply. He pulled out the Buddha slaying sword. A ball of samadhi flames of white bones surged into his body, and Abbot Qiushan's resentful and unwilling face disappeared. At this point, she had completely recovered from the injuries she had suffered in the battle at the Ghost Tower. Her cultivation had even improved. She turned back to look at the rescuers. Abbot Qiushan. The Shangqing great cultivators were all dumbfounded. The famous Qiushan temple of Yong province had been destroyed in a single night. How was this possible? Enemy of the Buddha. There was a flash of golden light. An old monk rushed down without any regard for anything. He was also a monk king who had undergone 3 heavenly tribulations. Little and held both swords in his hands. He stepped on the sea of blood and flew up to meet the old monk. As the bell rang, their figures crossed each other. The old monk was defeated. The Shangqing great cultivators were shocked and quickly retreated. Floating astronomy. Chapter 1276. Yong province wasn't big. The Shangqing cultivators all arrived, but none of them dared to approach. It wasn't just because of the sea of blood, but also because of the demonic aura. Pitch-black devil chi was so thick that it was almost liquid, and it kept gushing out of the devil cave, piercing through heaven and earth. They spread out in the night sky and turned into demonic clouds that covered the stars and the moon. The area within a radius of 100 miles was dyed into demonic soil, and it was still expanding. Once cultivators entered this demonic land, they would be suppressed. Even their magic treasures would be contaminated by demonic chi. She was an exception. Since there was no such thing as life and death, the hungry ghost realm and the 9 regions could be equated. Similarly, there was no such thing as good or evil. So the demon realm was nothing. Why would a person who was neither dead nor alive be afraid of being contaminated by demonic chi? The thick and deep sea of blood was even more filthy and evil than the devil chi. The black dragon king tore through the night sky and stopped outside the demonic earth. The governor of Yongzhou could hardly believe that this was the Mound Hill temple of the past. A few Shangqing cultivators reported to him what they had seen just now. Your Majesty, the enemy of Buddha is too powerful. It's hard to kill him anywhere else. If we enter Mound Hill Temple recklessly, we might suffer casualties. The governor of Yong province gritted his teeth. Just you wait. I refuse to believe she can remain in this demon cavern forever. The demon folk will never thank her for opening the demon cavern. The howls of demon folk filled the surroundings. The black demon chief flickered with light that was as dense as the stars. These were the eyes of the demon folk, filled with lust and evil. They all gathered on Little, and, dressed in white, she stood above the surging sea of blood and the surging demon chi, like a white lotus flower. Before the demon folk could attack, she struck. The blood sea banner was raised. The torrential sea of blood immediately poured into the devil's den, and the pairs of eyes were instantly filled with fear. The sea of blood was boundless, and there was no shore to turn back to. A few demon commanders did not hesitate to demonize, turning into hideous monsters. They abandoned their blood-corroded limbs and charged into the sky. As soon as the chaotic soul bell rang, they were like birds that had been shot by arrows, plunging headfirst into the sea of blood. Whether it be demon folk or monks, there was no difference. Cross the river in one go. Only when the Devil King appeared would she need to personally make a move. She would either kill the Buddha or abandon the immortal to kill him with a single sword strike. The surging sea of blood became even more viscous. The thick smell of blood could be smelled even from 100 miles away. More and more skeletons appeared in the sea of blood. Some of them were as strong as demon kings. All of them looked ferocious and had strange bones. They were all transformed from fallen demon kings. Crystalline demon hearts were deeply embedded in the white bones, and they even retained some of their original intelligence and techniques. However, they had already become slaves of the sea of blood, massacring demon folk. The great cultivators of the Harmony province watched this feast of slaughter with their mouths agape. Only now did they understand that she had not opened the demon cavern to lure demon folk in. Instead, she wanted to feed on these demon folk. Every time a demon king fell, the great cultivators would feel a chill in their hearts. They believed that they were not stronger than these demon kings. If he were to attack recklessly, he would be suppressed by the demonic chi, and his outcome would be even worse. From the ancient times until now, the demon folk invasions that had brought great calamities to the 9 provinces had actually been stopped by her alone, and she grew stronger the more she fought. In the end, she didn't even need to do anything herself. More and more powerful skeletal blood slaves appeared in the sea of blood. Although she could not command them as freely as she could command the skeleton demons, she could still command them with the blood sea banner. She wielded the blood sea banner and stood above the sea of blood, like the commander of an army slaughtering the endless army of demon folk. A 3-headed, 6-armed demon king fought his way out of the encirclement. He was already missing 2 heads, and only 3 arms remained. He stared at her above the sea of blood in fear. "What kind of monster are you?" It was truly laughable for a demon king to ask a question like that, but no one could laugh. A strange, twisted sword landed in the demon king's hand. Before he could even respond, sword intent rushed into his sea of consciousness. His eyes rolled back, and his entire body convulsed. The demon king suddenly let out a strange, deranged smile. "Master, let me play too." Little and nodded. Ever since she had tossed the forsaken immortal sword into the blood sea banner, the sword soul had become much more obedient. Her relationship with the sword had already shifted. She was currently becoming the true master of the forsaken immortal step by step, branding her will deeply into the forsaken immortal sword soul. This was not because of a difference in strength. Only a mysterious existence like the 5 absolutes immortal would struggle to subdue the forsaken immortal with a cultivation of the 3rd heavenly tribulation. Instead, the forsaken immortal sword soul had already admitted defeat in the clash between the will of the human and the sword. The fact that it refused to devour her at a critical moment was already proof of fear, and When she began to implement the will of the white bone bodhisattva in the path of white bone and great beauty, it was without a doubt the one that experienced it the most. Its twisted madness suddenly seemed as laughable as a clown. From a regular perspective, the forsaken immortal sword was a deranged sword. It could not be compared to a deranged bodhisattva at all. Even a sliver of the will's legacy was enough to subdue it, turning it into a true servant. The forsaken immortal sword's soul forcefully devoured the Demon King's power, and the Demon King's colossal body rapidly shrank. Bones squeezed out from his flesh and blood, piercing through his skin and shooting out. They hovered vertically above the sea of blood and actually began to flash with light. Little and immediately understood what the forsaken immortal sword soul was trying to do. The Demon King said, "Sword formation of heaven and earth." With the forsaken immortal sword as the core and several hundred bones as support, a sword formation of heaven and earth was formed. The sea of blood descended and minced the demon folk furiously. He reforged all of the small white bone swords according to the soul's wishes. The artifact forging section could be considered the most important section of the path of white bone and great beauty. It was not just an external object, but an extension of her body. It was equivalent to a sword cultivator's life-bound sword, or even more so. Over the years, she had basically never stopped forging various white bone artifacts. Even her white bone and great beauty could be viewed as another form of artifact. Her artifact forging methods were extremely brilliant, as long as white bone was used as the raw material. Even if it was not an artifact recorded in the path of white bone and great beauty, she could still forge it. Within the blazing flames, the small white bone swords gradually melted and reformed. All of them became strangely twisted. Some of them were curved like blades, some were at right angles, and some only had half of them. Not a single one of them looked like a sword. In the end, even the number changed. Originally, there were 364 of them, which made up 365 with the forsaken immortal sword. But now, there were only 139 of them. Not only was the number much smaller, but they were also completely unbalanced, giving off the feeling that they were twisted and incomplete. There were many sets of artifacts in the world. None of them would use such a meaningless number. However, the soul of the forsaken immortal sword was overjoyed. It said in a flattering manner, "This is great. This is exactly what I wanted. This way, it'll be even easier to kill. Master, you treat me much better than that old fiend." This was not completely false. To the fiend immortal, the path of the sword was only one of the 5 absolutes. Even though it was the most important path of killing, the problem was that there was no one in the 9 provinces who was his opponent. Moreover, the forsaken immortal sword was not a good sword to him. He would have to give it up sooner or later. So why would he waste the effort to forge such a twisted sword formation? It was not as interesting as playing the zither or painting. For little, and there were many threats in front of her. The most direct threat was the great cultivators of the various provinces, as well as the demons from the demonic domain. Yongzhou and Mountain Temple were just the beginning. The biggest threat was the hungry ghost realm and the great Xia dynasty, which she did not know what they were up to. This was her war alone, and the enemy was the entire world. At least for a long time, the destructive power of the forsaken immortal sword would be worth using. The soul of the sword could also save her a lot of effort to use other methods. Thus, she continued to forge artifacts. One by one, the skull prayer beads rolled out of the Samadhi white bone fire and turned into skeleton demons. They bowed to her and flew off in all directions. When she had forged 33 skull prayer beads, all the white bone artifacts that she had lost in the battle at the Ghost Tower were finally restored. She did not stop there. She forged another 3 skull prayer beads, making up a total of 36 beads. In an instant, every skeleton demon scattered throughout Yongzhou became even more powerful and ferocious. Their strength surpassed that of ordinary demon kings and great cultivators, reaching the middle stage of the third heavenly tribulation. Although there were only 3 additional skull prayer beads, it made the entire string of skull prayer beads reach a higher level. The 36 skull prayer beads symbolized the 36 types of troubles. There were 6 of them, each representing the 3 types of suffering, joy, loss, good and evil, and peace. They combined to form 36 types of troubles. This was a transitional stage for the skull prayer beads to advance from low grade to middle grade. 27 skull prayer beads were only low grade. Chapter 1278. A mountain of clouds passed through the blue sky. Li Fengyuan stood on the surging clouds, gazing down at the ground sternly. After receiving her news, he had rushed to the Harmony province as soon as possible, but what he saw was this. The sun scorched the ground. It should have been the season for vegetation to grow, but there was only endless, yellowish-brown barren land, as far as the eye could see. There were no birds in the air, and there were no fish in the water. Even the deserts of the Scarlet Province and the tundra of the Frost Province should not be so deathly still. A feathered person said, "My king, I heard that she's even opened the largest demon cavern in the Harmony Province. Right now, demon chi surges into the sky from the north, polluting the region of 500 kilometers. Even demon folk struggle to compare to such evil deeds. Even if that's the case, are you still going to help her?" Li Fengyuan looked away and gazed at the sky. "She no longer needs my help, nor does she need anyone else's help. Let's return to the Cloud Province. No, let's directly go to the East Sea and leave this place of trouble." The feathered people all said, "My king is wise." Li Fengyuan suddenly turned around. He could vaguely hear the strange sound of a bell. The feathered people sensed nothing. They asked curiously, "My king, what's wrong?" "Nothing. Let's go." The mountain of clouds flew off, leaving behind a long trail as it headed east, vanishing into the horizon. Ding, clang, the sound of the bells swept through the plains with little and landing gracefully in a city. She stood on the tallest building in the city barefoot before taking off high into the air again. The chaotic soul bell on her waist rang. In the busy, sweaty streets, in the restaurants where people toasted each other, wherever the sound of the bell passed by, the souls were thrown into disarray. Suddenly, it turned into a ball of pale white flames, rushing into the sky strand by strand, chasing after her. She seemed to wander through the world aimlessly, followed by millions of streaks of pale white flames. She crossed mountains and valleys, passed through day and night the Dragon Province. Thousands of mountains surged towards the center like waves, clustered around a tall mountain. It was like a huge dragon in the ocean had raised its head, ready to soar off. This was the greatest ley line in the world, Dragonhead Mountain. It was said that the mountain was transformed from the corpse of a true dragon, but that was a matter from 1,000,000 years ago. The dragons had already left this world a long time ago. Many legends could no longer be verified. At the peak of the mountain, there was a great hall that was over 1,000 feet tall. It left the sea of clouds at its feet and was almost connected to the sky. It had the power to dominate the 9 prefectures. Under the sunlight, once again, it was filled with extraordinary splendor. Changes swirled. It was as if it was shrouded in neon lights, extremely magnificent and glorious. It didn't seem like it was made by humans, much less by humans. And that was indeed the case. This was the Senate built by the gods in the Divine Kingdom era. All the deity races would send representatives to hold a meeting here. The original elders of the 7 god clans were responsible for coordinating the disputes between the various races, discussing strategies to fend off the demon folk, and suppressing the riots of the slaves. Other than the giant lumberman, most of the gods' figures were similar to that of humans. It was said that they were influenced by the dragon clan, and that was why this hall was so huge. In order to celebrate the arrival of a new era and increase the authority of their own race, the various races had done their best to build this grand hall. There should not have been such a tall mountain in the world. According to the report of the governor of Yong Province, the foe of Buddha has wreaked havoc in Yong Province, and not a single living being has survived, other than the capital, Great Liang City, and the place where the Banyan Tree King is entrenched. The cultivation sects in other places have all been destroyed. Many cultivators have retreated into Great Liang City. The demons of Yong Province have received a warning from the Banyan Tree King. They either hide deep underground, gather around the Banyan Tree King, or simply flee Yong Province. The protector hawk god paused and concluded, Yong Province is finished. The hall was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. The danger of the foe of Buddha was beyond everyone's expectations. They all looked at where the three ducal ministers were. Grand Preceptor Dong was long gone, and the expressions of the remaining two grew increasingly gloomy. Originally, when they reached their positions, all they had to consider was ascension. The threat of death no longer existed, but now they deeply felt it once more. Grand Preceptor Dong's death was completely meaningless. It was basically like he had been slaughtered in passing, as lowly as a mortal. Back then, he had already been treated as a challenge to the entire Great Xia. But looking at it now, perhaps he did not take the Great Xia seriously at all. The Emperor of the Great Xia asked, "Where is she right now?" "I can't lock onto her. She might come to the Dragon Province." There was a series of whispers in the hall. What if the foe of Buddha came to the Dragon Province? Was she going to be like the governor of Yong Province, hiding on Dragon Head Mountain? Their sects and dwellings were scattered across the Dragon Province. If they retreated, it would be a great humiliation. Floating astronomy. Chapter 1279. Silence! Si Ching shouted. He wore the gilded dragon robe of the crown prince and stood beside the throne, in charge of maintaining order in the hall. This job sounded quite authoritative, but it was just a fox borrowing the tiger's might. If there were eunuchs in this world, this would be the work of a eunuch. He was extremely annoyed, but he did not dare to show it on his face. After all, he was the weakest among the crown princes. Even Si Bao, who went through the tribulation later than him, was stronger than him. This was because his physical body was destroyed by Li Qingshan, and his strength was greatly reduced. The hatred in his heart had never subsided, and was growing with each passing day. The hall immediately quieted down. The emperor said, "Our great Xia, with all the officials and generals in the court, can't think of a way to deal with a mere person?" The head of the 9 ministers, Zhong Zai, said, "I have something to say. If it's just to deal with the enemy of Buddha, there are many ways. It's not impossible to kill her, but we need to use the power of the whole country. Now is the crucial moment of worship to the heavens. After the worship succeeds, the enemy of Buddha is just a small problem. If the worship fails, even if we kill the enemy of Buddha, the 9 regions will not escape the fate of being swallowed by the hungry ghost realm." The left imperial advisor said, "It's not difficult to force the hungry ghost realm to retreat, but this time the hungry ghost realm is here for the enemy of Buddha, and they are determined to get it at all costs." The emperor frowned. "The enemy of Buddha again." Zhong Zai said, "The left imperial advisor is right. The problem is not just the hungry ghost realm. The enemy of Buddha has already opened dozens of demon dens. If this continues, there will be an unprecedented demon disaster soon. Although it is indeed the enemy of Buddha that caused this situation. However, our enemy is not just one person, but 2 worlds. The emperor suddenly stood up. He said angrily, "Is this enemy of Buddha sent by the heavens to go against us? Are you going to let us watch her run amok without doing anything?" In an instant, the wind and clouds outside the hall surged and thunder rumbled. Zhongzai said, "A little impatience will spoil the great plan. Your Majesty, please prioritize the worship to the heavens." All the ministers said, "Your Majesty, please prioritize the worship to the heavens." The great Xia emperor slowly sat down again. "Forget it. When the worship to the heavens is completed, a mere enemy of Buddha will be easily captured. Eagle King, have you found the reincarnated celestial?" The protector eagle god replied, "Not yet. The various prefectures have prepared a list of names, and there are some people with extraordinary talents among them. He might have been a cultivator in his previous life, but it's not the celestial we're looking for. Most of them just happen to retain some memories of their past lives. They didn't even know what cultivation was in their past lives, so they couldn't be considered as reincarnations of deities. Perhaps the celestial being's memory hadn't recovered, and he hadn't remembered his mission. Otherwise, he would definitely come to the Dragon Province." The reincarnation of a deva was actually a vague concept. All living beings revolved in the 6 paths of reincarnation. Any random person he grabbed could be considered a reincarnation. Only he was a cultivator in his previous life and had some memories of his previous life. Only then could he be called the reincarnation of a celestial being. The problem was that 9 regions spanned hundreds of thousands of miles, and the population at its peak was more than 10 billion. There were too many talented people. On the other hand, there was truly no way to verify the memories of one's previous lifetime. Even if one did exist, it would mostly be blurry and incomplete, and one could only rely on one's comprehension ability and speed of cultivation. Even if some people refused to admit it themselves, others would still believe they were the reincarnations of a celestial being, such as Little, and, as a result, there were just far too many people in the world who claimed to be reincarnations of a celestial being. However, the imperial court of Great Xia only wanted to find a single person. Over all these years, they had ordered the Hawkwolf Guard to search the various places silently, but they had never found anything. Many years ago, there was someone like that in the Clear River Prefecture, called Chu Tian. Back then, Gu Yenying was still the White Hawk commander of the Rui Commandery, but whether it was intentional or not, she did not cooperate with her father's work at all. Afterwards, Chu Tian died young, and the reincarnation of a celestial being became a joke. As for the celestial the imperial court of Great Xia was looking for, he never appeared. Under the hazy moonlight, the night mist enveloped the tiny islands in the lake. It was as if they had not been affected by the upheaval of the world at all. It was as tranquil as a painting. A man and a woman strolled along the shore. The man was handsome and elegant, while the woman was beautiful and enchanting. They seemed to be a pair of immortal companions who had grown tired of conflict and returned to seclusion hand in hand. "Why are you so special to me?" The woman was rather confused, but she was also rather eager. A sliver of surprise flashed through the man's eyes, as if he had never expected someone as clever as her to ask such a stupid question. He said with complete sincerity, "Because you've always been very special." "Ha! You must be especially bad." The woman lowered her eyes and smiled in a self-deprecating manner. "Yeah, not only are you especially bad, but you're also very cruel." The man smiled. "Yeah, I've always thought I hid it very well." The woman smiled as well. "It's useless. I've always experienced it deeply, but it seems like the past White Hawk commanders of the Rui Commandery have all been like that." The man smiled bitterly as if he was helpless. The woman grumbled, Oi, if you're talking about me, then so be it, but do you have to talk about my master too? The man was mildly surprised. He had never seen her behave like this before. It was actually surprisingly enchanting. Suddenly, he remembered that she had practiced arts of charm in the past, but the sliver of affection was not fake. He smiled. Just like the saying, like master, like disciple. Senior Gu obviously has her reasons for accepting you as her disciple. Any observant person can see how special you are. Perhaps she just finds me particularly annoying, so she specially accepted me as her disciple so that she can torture me. The woman said, half jokingly, half seriously, I've never heard of something like that. Chapter 1280. Did you know? My surname was originally Shangguan. Qian Rongji stared at the rippling moonlight in the lake in a daze. It was as if her soul had already passed through time and returned to a very, very long time ago. All that remained here was an empty shell. Lin Xian smiled. Shangguan Rongji sounds better. However, when she spat out the matters of the past that she had buried deeply, Lin Xian gradually stopped smiling. Lin Xian couldn't laugh anymore. He didn't know what to say. Even though he had lived 2 lives and experienced numerous dangers, so much so that he had become indifferent to all sorts of slaughter and death. However, the pain in the depths of people's hearts, the unforgettable and unspeakable humiliation, even he felt bitter when the person involved personally mentioned it. He could not help but think back to his 2 lives. Compared to what she had gone through, it could be described as smooth sailing. The greatest setback he had suffered was when he had yet to recover his memories and was called Chu Tian. However, even Chu Tian had spent most of his life being arrogant, complacent, and heartless. Qian Rongji's voice was extraordinarily indifferent, as if she was talking about someone else. Lin Xian could not help but feel a hint of sympathy, but he immediately dismissed that thought. He recovered his pride as a celestial. There are plenty of pitiful people in the world. Just how many of them will become demonesses like her? Since there's so much pain in life, why don't you just die earlier? Why do you have to trouble others? How dare you ruin my mission, preventing me from reporting back to the Dragon Province? You deserve to die. Qian Rongji, oh Qian Rongji, if I don't toy with you like a dog and then torture you to death, I won't be able to dispel my hatred. However, sorrow and pity appeared on his handsome face. He interrupted her, unable to bear it any longer. Rongji, don't say any more. Qian Rongji's shoulders trembled. She slowly turned around and said sorrowfully, Lin Xian, I've never mentioned this to anyone before. Please listen to me, all right? I want you to know about my true past, but if you're sick of hearing it, you can leave. You can pretend like nothing has happened. All right, go ahead, Lin Xian said helplessly. After changing his attitude, he no longer felt pity for her. Instead, it was filled with cruel pleasure, tearing open her old scars and making her bleed. This could also be considered a part of revenge. Until Qian Rongji finished speaking in one breath. His face was already covered in tears. Am I a monster? He asked in a daze. Yes, you are a monster, a twisted and insane monster. You can even say those details. How shameless, Lin Xian thought. He took a step forward and said passionately, No, none of this was your fault. It's the Qian clan's people who deserve to die. But since you've already taken revenge, why don't you let it go? Your master isn't torturing you. He's trying to make you turn back. Can we really turn back? Qian Rongji was at a loss. She looked at her hands, and her eyes became firm again. No, there's no turning back. If I turn back, I'll have nothing left. I can only continue like this. Sometimes I think I'm doomed to suffer all my life. If that's the case, how can I escape the arrangement of fate? You don't have nothing. You still have me. I'll always be with you. Qian Rongji's expression changed. Really? Listen to what I've said. It's true. Lin Xian, swear to the heavens that I'll be with you forever. The boundless will of the 9 provinces obviously did not pay attention to her frivolous words. However, just like any woman intoxicated in love, she became emotionally moved and could not help but throw herself at her lover. Lin Xian hesitated for a moment, but he still opened his arms firmly. This was a godsend opportunity. Even a weak child could kill an unguarded adult, not to mention that the difference in strength between them was not that great. He could not delay the matter of the heaven-climbing vine any longer. The Dragon Province was currently searching for him. If he wanted to enter the royal court of the Dragon Province gloriously, he had to take action. When they embraced each other tightly, Lin Xian felt a wave of pain. However, with his willpower, he could endure it. Qian Rongji's hoarse, apologetic voice rang out by his ear. Sorry, I've already done my best to restrain myself. Lin Xian said sincerely, You've already given me the best. What's a little pain worth? He considered how he could capture her without killing her immediately. Really? I'll give you more, much more. Qian Rongji murmured. She kissed Lin Xian's neck with her red lips, gently licking and kissing it. A cloud just happened to block out the moonlight. The atmosphere of darkness permeated the air. Lin Xian thought about the past she spoke of and felt disgust. However, this disgust turned into shock very soon. Pain that was hundreds of times greater than what he was just now suddenly surged into his soul. His eyes suddenly widened, and he let out a meaningless gurgling sound from his mouth. Even a reincarnated celestial would not be able to ignore the pain of hell, not to mention her almost insane method of cultivation. She possessed thousands of hell snakes instead of just borrowing the power of hell. She could be described as a living hell. This is the best thing I have. Do you like it? Don't worry, I'll satisfy you completely. Before he knew it, Qian Rongji's eyes had turned into the cold eyes of a snake before he knew it. Hell snakes crawled all over her face. Even her red lips and tongue were entangled with venomous snakes, hissing and flicking their tongues. Lin Xian's face darkened as his veins bulged. He squeezed out 2 words from between his teeth. Rongji! He still struggled to believe that his identity had been exposed. He was confident that his disguise was perfect. From Chu Tian to Lin Xian, he had indeed become a completely different person. No matter how careful Qian Rongji was, it was impossible for her to discover any traces of him. Just what had gone wrong, or was she still testing him? Chu Tian. Qian Rongji's voice was extremely excited. She hugged him firmly, as if her arms wanted to squeeze into his body. Hell snakes wormed their way into his body, gnawing at his soul. Did you know? I hate it when others pity me the most. Am I that pitiful? I'll make them 100 times, 1,000 times more pitiful than me. Fortunately, I'm not that cruel. At the very least, I won't pity them. All right, I've already given you so much. It's about time you pay me back. A vine extended, stabbing into Chu Tian's dantian. Chu Tian did his best to concentrate. Let me go, or I'll take you down with me. All right, I can't wait anymore. Qian Rongji wrapped herself even tighter, like a huge python that had swallowed an elephant. Even if she was about to choke to death, she would not let go of the prey in her mouth. You madman! Chu Tian was filled with regret. He should not have cared about the dignity of celestials. He should have asked for reinforcements from the imperial court earlier. At this moment, the heaven-climbing vine pierced his dantian. It was empty, without the existence of a golden core. A purple light lit up on his forehead. A small purple person that looked like a nascent soul turned into a purple light and flew away. He cultivated the purple mansion, heavenly book of the 10,000 heavenly book. He opened up the purple mansion instead of forming a golden core. He had the power of a nascent soul cultivator during the second heavenly tribulation. Most of it was to deal with Qian Rongji, but he did not expect that he would use an escape technique similar to the nascent soul projection. At the beginning, Qian Rongji let go of Chu Tian's body that had been sucked dry by the heaven-climbing vine. She chuckled, "Coward, you're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."